Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Eat less sugar, eat more fiber, eat out of the garden more. So have you set your New Year's resolutions yet? We'll talk with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society about some good gardening habits to start in 2022. The UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden Superintendent Emeritus Warren Roberts, he's ushering in the new year with a plant that just might be putting on a show right now with its colorful berries or reddish leaves in your yard. It's the heavenly bamboo, also known as Nandina domestica, and it's our plant of the week. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. It's episode 159 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. And we'll do it all in way over 30 minutes. Happy New Year! Let's go. Well, we're at that time of year when a lot of us make resolutions, and that includes gardeners as well. What plans do you have for your garden or your gardening habits in 2022? We are talking with Andrew Bunting. He is the Vice President of Public Gardens and Landscapes at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, an internationally recognized organization that was founded a long, long time ago. It's also the producer of the world-famous Philadelphia Flower Show, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And Andrew, thanks for joining us here on the Garden Basics podcast. You are part of an organization that is going to be celebrating a rather big milestone in a few years.
Yeah, we're only a handful of years away from our 200th anniversary.
So I noticed that at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society website, and by the way, that is an excellent and a very beautiful website as well, phsonline.org. You have a lot of great information for the gardeners of, I guess, is it for the Philadelphia area or is it for Pennsylvania in general? Because Pennsylvania is a rather complicated state, I think, when it comes to gardening, because there's something like, 3 USDA zones in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of our garden information is probably more for gardeners of, I would actually call it the mid-Atlantic region. So, from, say, Washington, D.C. to, New York and, all of New Jersey and Delaware, probably to like the middle of Pennsylvania. Once you get into the western parts of Pennsylvania, like you said, it's, it can be 2 to 3 zones colder than it is in the Philadelphia area.
So let's talk a little bit about the pride and joy of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and that's the Philadelphia Flower Show, which has to be the premier garden event in the United States of America.
Yeah, that's right. It's normally it's indoors, but with COVID, it was out of doors last year for the first time ever in its history. But when it's indoors, it's the largest indoor flower show in the world. It's definitely, like you said, the biggest kind of horticultural spectacle in the United States. It's been running also since almost the beginning of the society. So the society started in 1827. The first flower show was in 1829, and it's been running more or less, every year since then. And so last year, it started towards the end of May. This year, it's also going to be out of doors again. And it's held in a big park in South Philadelphia called FDR Park. And in 2022, it'll run from June 11th to June 19th.
Which is a bit of change from the dates of previous Philadelphia flower shows, which were held, somewhere between winter and spring.
Yeah, that's right. It typically starts right towards the end of February and then continues to, the first 9 or 10 days of March. And the plan is, or the hope is, once indoor activities become safer, that, hopefully it will, someday once again can return to indoor show as well.
So for the people displaying plants at the Philadelphia Flower Show, do they find this to be an easier adaptation for a June show than doing a show in March?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to both. I would say doing it in May like we did last year, in June like we'll do this year, is the plants, many of the plants that are on display and flowering would already be flowering. So, for example, you could go into a nursery and get a large flowering hydrangea and bring it to the show and have it be on display. Now, if you want a hydrangea in flower for the winter show, then you have to force it in a greenhouse into flower. So the indoor show does have a lot of forced plants. It still has, 30 feet cherry trees that somebody has forced, laying down on its side in a greenhouse. But we also, the indoor flower show takes more advantage of tropical plants as well as cut flowers. And then the outdoor show, we still do floral exhibits, but they're perhaps a little harder to execute because the weather can be fairly warm in middle of June.
It could be downright humid.
Yeah, humid, could be hot, could be windy.
And it might rain.
Might rain. Yeah, we fingers crossed that the rain holds off, or if it comes, it's just a nice little shower.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal, really, all in all. But
right.
The Philadelphia Flower Show is always an attraction. It attracts people from around the world.
Yes, and we have a strong following in the area. Since it's been going for so long, it's really a multi-generational event. So you'll see grandparents with their kids, with their grandchildren who come in from the train, either from the suburbs, or lots of people come down from either up from Washington D.C. or down from New York or Boston to come to the show.
June 11th through the 19th at FDR Park in Philadelphia. More information about the Philadelphia Flower Show can be found at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society website, phsonline.org. All right. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about now that we're in this reflective mood, wondering about what we're going to do differently in 2022, the brains over there at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society came up with some garden trends for 2022 that are ideal for gardeners of all interests and experience levels to incorporate into their own gardens. So let's talk about some of those. One of my favorite things to do is to promote the Good Bug Hotel, which is to bring in pollinator plants and natives.
I would say natives first, and then pollinator plants, which could be natives. They could also be exotic plants. Have both been trending for some time. I would say the native plant movement has been in full swing for, I would say, at least 2 decades, and I would say there's no sign of that waning whatsoever. And then kind of a nuanced aspect to that is, perhaps planting native gardens that have plants that are great for attracting pollinators, whether they be things like kind of the classic is the butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, or any of the mountain mints. The genus is Pycnanthemum. Cone flowers are great for monarchs and swallowtail butterflies. Almost anything that's in the daisy family, whether it's a black-eyed Susan or helianthus or Shasta daisies, those are all good plants for generally for pollinators. So a lot of people are planting pollinator strips. They might plant actually down the row in between the vegetables in a vegetable garden. They may plant a strip of permanent pollinators or around the edge of the vegetable garden so that they can ensure that they have a good host of pollinators to pollinate the vegetables in their vegetable garden. Or you're also seeing a lot of ornamental gardens that are pollinator heavy.
Exactly. And I imagine the bee-friendly plants as well probably attract all sorts of native bees.
Yes. Yeah. So I used to live in Illinois, and I think we had over 300 native bees just in Illinois. So most people know the honeybee or the bumblebee, but there's many, many, many native bees as well in all states throughout the United States. So, and there's also, little pollinating wasps that are non-stinging wasps and other pollinating insects. So, it's good to support those, as the best you can with introducing plants that are, known to be, a great attractor of a myriad of pollinators.
And beneficial insects as well, which can cut down your use of pesticides.
Yeah, that's right. We advocate for the use of as little chemicals in the garden as possible. So really, no fungus or no synthetic fungicides, herbicides, or insecticides. So once you eliminate those, then you create, really healthy environment for your plants to grow strong. And then also, if you're spraying for the bad pests, you're going to kill the good ones as well. Limiting the amount of chemical fertilizers in the garden will ensure that you have all the beneficial insects as well,
including the beneficial soil microbes as well.
There's as much of a network of activity in the soil, mycorrhizae, that are helping with different plants and the native soils, and helping with to facilitate essentially the exchange of nutrients.
And to make room for all of this, well, you might need to tear up a little bit of lawn to put in some more plants. And ripping out lawn, here in California, local governments are paying people to rip out their lawn and put in a more drought-tolerant garden. I don't think they're not doing that back there, are they?
No, not so much. Not for drought reasons. I mean, I know that a good portion of California is a Mediterranean climate, and therefore doesn't rain much during the summer months. So, irrigating a lawn, especially in the summer in California, is not very water-wise at all. So one reason for eliminating lawn would be to eliminate the amount of kind of inputs you need, watering being one of them. The other is that it needs to be mowed. So, mowing requires a certain amount of gas, obviously, and fossil fuels to do so. So every homeowner could even reduce their lawn by, let's just say, 25 square feet, which is only 5 feet by 5 feet. And it was done across the entire United States. You can imagine how much less water would need to go into that collective amount of lawn, and how much less fuel to maintain the mowing. And then you could also then take those, that square footage and turn it into whatever, a vegetable garden or a pollinator garden or a flower garden, or any kind of garden would be better than just having, pure lawn. I mean, I have a lawn in my home, and I enjoy it for, a variety of reasons, recreation and otherwise. So it's not as though we're suggesting the complete elimination of the great American lawn, but just a little reduction here and there would really be a great way for us, in a small way, to do our part to make for a better overall environment.
Exactly. Your children and your dogs do not need 5,000 square feet of turf. But good luck convincing people of that. That's the hard part.
Yeah. Like my neighbor, I live in south of Philadelphia, and my neighbor next to me, she took just a back corner of her yard that she never did anything back there except for mowed it. And it's probably, I would say it's 20 by 20, so it's 400 square feet. And she just didn't mow it. It just turned essentially into like a little meadow. And it was amazing just to see like what came up and flowered. And I'm sure it was a great habitat for, birds and insects and so forth. So even if you didn't turn it into garden, you could just let it go kind of naturalistic. Just let it grow.
We're glad to have Smart Pots on board supporting the Garden Basics podcast. Smart Pots, it's the original award-winning fabric planter. It's sold worldwide, and Smart Pots are proudly made 100% in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors. If a frost or freeze is in the forecast, moving your frost tender plants that are in the Smart Pots that have handles make them easier to move closer to the house for added warmth, or you could even move them inside for the winter. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts when you buy Smart Pots at Amazon. If you want to see them before you buy, Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Let's get back to our discussion of New Year's resolutions for gardeners from Andrew Bunting of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. For new gardeners, the magnetism of heading towards the garden center cannot be denied. Yes, you will do that. But the thing is, your neighbors may have some interesting plants that they have too many of. I know I have that disease where if I plant tomatoes, well, I'm going to plant 3 or 4 of the same tomato seeds just to make sure that one of them comes up. Well, of course, all 3 or 4 come up, so that means I've got plants out front that I'm trying to give away in April. And I'm sure a lot of people back there are in the same boat as well, and they probably have some sort of plant swaps or some sort of way to exchange plants with each other.
Yeah, so plant swaps have become really popular. I think a lot of it's been kind of energized by or catalyzed by house plants, which are also continue to be really popular. And that's an easy way for people to exchange house plants, just a little bit of a spider plant or a little cutting from a jade plant or a leaf from an African violet can be shared with somebody else, and then they're all relatively easy to propagate. I know people in my neighborhood, they might have, say, a hosta that's gotten too big, and they'll divide it into like 10 little hostas and maybe not even pot them up, just to put them on a little bit of tarp at the end of their driveway, and then through kind of social media exchanges like Facebook or Instagram, or we have, and maybe you have the same in California, we have this platform called Nextdoor. Mm-hmm. So the town I live in is Swarthmore. So Nextdoor Swarthmore, you go on there and say, I've got 10 free hostas, first come, first serve, give your address. And it's a great way to really share, plants that you may have extra of. You might have grown like a dozen extra seedlings of tomatoes, or you might have some extra potting soil. They also use the exchanges for things like nursery pots and things, other gardening items that people have extras of. We operate 2 pop-up gardens, which have also kind of a food and beverage component, but they're also fairly large gardens and they're in the city. So we do these plant swaps where everybody's invited to come. And if you bring like 5 little house plants, then essentially the rules are whatever you bring, you get that much in, you get to swap or trade for it. So you bring 5 whatever, and then you can take 5 of whatever from what everybody else has brought. I've seen it as a great gateway for somebody who's never gardened before and maybe wants to get some new house plants or get some new perennials for their garden or vegetable starts or a little bit of potting soil. So it's free. It's just based on kind of the exchange and bartering system. But, some of them have become quite large as well. And that would include seeds as well. How many people that use an entire seed packet? Exactly. Think of, like every time you plant carrots or something, you often have like half of the packet left. So you might as well exchange those. I saw actually at the flower show, how lots of communities have these free libraries where it's like essentially like a little box on a post, and they put extra books in there that they're finished with, and anybody in the community can come and take free books. This exhibit had the same idea, but it was for seeds. So it'd be great if like in different communities, if there was kind of a comparable idea of like this little free library, but for free garden seeds, where Maybe there's this one place in the town where everybody puts all their free seeds, and it's kind of a first come, first served basis that would help disseminate all this extra garden seed.
I like that idea. That's a great plan, and I hope more and more people take advantage of that, and maybe attending a plant swap or even setting up your own with others in your neighborhood is the way to go. And I think that's a good New Year's resolution for gardeners in 2022. One thing I am fond of saying to new gardeners is that the healthiest food you can eat is the food that you grow yourself. And it's with new techniques around now, it's getting easier to have a complete fruit orchard in your backyard when you practice size control. Is that trend taking off back east there?
Yes. In fact, in Philadelphia, there's a nonprofit called the Philadelphia Orchard Project, and what they advocate is, that you can actually grow fruit trees in a relatively small amount of land. It might just be a small side yard, where through either cultivar selection, maybe getting cultivars that are more diminutive in size, or through pruning, maybe training to a fence or espaliering, you can be fairly productive in a small amount of space. And so there's been a real resurgence in all types of fruits, your traditional fruits, pears and peaches and apples, but also starting to see maybe some of your non-traditional plants. Like for a long time, because our winters were colder, like figs did not do well here, but now figs are fairly hardy, especially if you grow them up next to the southern facing side of a building or a house. At home, I grow Asian persimmons. So our native persimmon, Diospyros virginiana, is kind of the size of maybe like a large marshmallow. But when you eat it, unless it's been frosted, it really makes your mouth pucker. Mm-hmm. But the Asian persimmons, Diospyros khaki, are much bigger. And once they've been frosted a couple times and they're soft, you can eat them right off of the tree. And they have like a real sweet kind of pulpy aspect to them. And there's many cultivars, like the one I have, Saijo, Saijo. That's kind of an egg-shaped fruit. But then there's one called Great Wall that's kind of squat, almost looks like a little pumpkin. And they're orange, so they're really pretty as well. So you're starting to see a lot of people also experimenting with different types of fruits in the garden.
Another trend for 2022 that the people at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society are encouraging, and I'm on this bandwagon too, is have a cut flower garden.
Cut flowers have really, everybody loves cut flowers. There's what has sprung up is this kind of boutique cut flower industry. So there's lots of people growing plants that have been around a long time. A lot of people might consider them kind of old-fashioned flowers, but they're growing lots of varieties and making them, a lot of them are actually being sold through farmers markets. I think that's one place where there's been this amazing revival of cut flowers is through farmers market, like the farmers market I have in my town. There's at least one or two purveyors of great cut flowers, and they often, you can either buy them individually or oftentimes in a nice little bouquet. So, some of the flower types that have become really popular are dahlias. Dahlias, again, are a plant that does quite well in the Midwest, does relatively well on the East Coast, I would think, and, especially in Northern California, I would think it would do fairly well. And they come from, some are like huge, like almost like 12 inches across, and then others are much more diminutive, and they come in almost every color except for blue. There's pinks and reds and magentas and yellows and whites and, really all sizes as well. And then, zinnias, zinnias was kind of one of the flowers my grandmother had in her garden in Nebraska, and that's also had an amazing renaissance, both in the garden, but especially as a cut flower. So some of these old-fashioned flowers are really making a significant comeback in this what is really an exploding boutique industry.
Oh, I love zinnias as a cut flower. They last a long time indoors. And the problem is, at nurseries, they don't carry a very broad selection of zinnias. In fact, most of them are more like bedding zinnias. But if you want some with some vibrant color or vibrant-looking flowers that get a little bit of size to them, you just might have to plant from seed, and that's okay.
Yeah. I would say that with zinnias, right, to get the most variety, probably just grow seeds yourself. Dahlias actually come as a tuber, kind of a fleshy root. And there are some specialty companies in the U.S. Actually, one of my, not for dahlias, but just for unusual annuals in general, many of which could be used for cut flowers. California has one of my most favorite nurseries, Annie's Annuals.
Yes,
which
indeed.
Is in, I think it's
in
technically Richmond, but kind of the Oakland area, and their mail order. Like we buy a lot of stuff from Annie's Annuals.
Ah, okay. Well, that's good news. The and zinnias are an easy plant to grow, and they too will attract the pollinators and beneficial insects as well.
Yeah, butterflies like zinnias for sure.
Yeah. So there's a great collection of triple duty flowers you can plant in your garden that not only are good for cutting, but also as pollinator to attract pollinators, to attract beneficial insects. So consider planting a cut flower garden in 2022. Well, that's quite the list for people to ponder. We'll have this posted at the Garden Basics newsletter that accompanies the podcast. And the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, again, their website, phsonline.org. And you can find out more information about the upcoming Philadelphia Flower Show to be held outdoors at FDR Park in Philadelphia, June 11th through the 19th. And that seems like almost too short of a time.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of effort to put together the flower show. So, it's a matter of keeping the plants going for 10 days or so, which, with the weather, I think that's a challenge. But our flower show is typically 9 to 10 days. So that's kind of in line with what we would typically do.
All right. Yes. What people don't realize about a lot of the major flower shows is that when the doors close to the public at 5 p.m. or whenever, there's a whole other shift that comes on duty to clean stuff up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We groom and water the plants into the wee hours of the following morning and have to have everything look, almost perfect, every day when we open the doors. Exactly.
Andrew Bunting is with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. He is their Vice President of Public Gardens and Landscapes. And again, more information online at phsonline.org. Andrew, thanks for helping us get off to 2022 to a good gardening start.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
If you haven't shopped at your favorite independently owned nursery lately, you know something you're missing out. Now arriving at California, Arizona, and Texas nurseries are Dave Wilson Nursery's excellent lineup of farmers market favorites of great tasting, healthy fruit and nut varieties. They're already potted up and ready to be planted. We're talking about almonds, blackberries, blueberries, boysenberries, figs, grapes, hops, kiwi, mulberries, olives, pomegranates, and a lot more. For you gardeners in the Pacific Northwest, mountain, and southern states, look for Dave Wilson's Farmers Market favorites in January and February. You want more? Well, by the second week in January, you're going to find your favorite Dave Wilson bare root deciduous fruit trees in stock, including my favorite, the plum apricot cross, the Pluot. Wholesale grower Dave Wilson Nursery has probably the best lineup of great-tasting fruit and nut varieties of any grower in the United States. Find out more at their website, davewilson.com. And while you're there, check out all the videos they have on how to plant and grow all their delicious varieties of fruit and nut trees. Plus, at davewilson.com, you're going to find the nursery nearest you that carries Dave Wilson's plants. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. Have you taken a look at the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter yet? There's one that accompanies every episode of the Garden Basics podcast. It's a deeper dive into what was discussed on the podcast, along with more great gardening information. And the newsletter for this episode, episode 159, expands upon one of the suggested New Year's resolutions from Andrew Bunting of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And it's one you didn't hear yet, because it's going to be a special extra podcast in this week's Garden Basic newsletter. Andrew Bunting talked about the rising popularity back east of gravel gardening. You'll hear his thoughts about it, followed by a discussion between me and Debbie Flower about its appropriateness for hot climates, along with perhaps some of the drawbacks of growing plants in rocks. It's a gravel garden podcast, only available in the Garden Basics newsletter, and it's out now. You can find a link to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter in the podcast show notes, or at farmerfred.com, or by going to substack.com/gardenbasics. Think of it as your garden resource that goes beyond the basics. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, and it's free. So please subscribe, share it with your gardening friends and family. The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, free. And thank you for listening. We always like to talk with Warren Roberts. He's the Superintendent Emeritus of the University of California Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. He gives us a plant of the week to enjoy. And Warren, in my estimation, your plant choice this week is downright heavenly.
Oh, how nice of you to say. Well, the common name for this plant, one of the common names is heavenly bamboo, or sacred bamboo, as it's sometimes called. It's not a bamboo, though, although it has a kind of a bamboo-like way of growing. Not so much in the invasiveness, but just the supple stems and featheriness of it. We're talking about Nandina domestica. It's related to the barberry family, which would be like old Oregon grape and others. But it's the genus Nandina has just one species, and it is native from the Himalayas over to Japan. I'm trying to think of why it would be called heavenly bamboo, mainly because it flowers and has beautiful fruit, berries, which bamboo, of course, doesn't. Bamboo is a grass, whereas this is not. Oh, another reason might be it comes from the Celestial Kingdom, which was one of the common names for China back in the Renaissance. In fact, one of the somewhat pejorative names for people from that area are celestials. I don't know if you've heard that. Not something to use, really. But it refers then to the Celestial Kingdom, which is what we know today as China. Traditionally, it is used, particularly in China, planted near doorways as a way of saying welcome. And this tradition has continued, especially in the Western United States. And sometimes people don't really know why, but it seems to be a tradition to use Nandina near a doorway. One thing, it doesn't take up too much horizontal room, so that there's usually room for it near a door. Now, the other thing is that it looks nice. It looks nice all year. It's an evergreen plant. And so it has a pleasant, beautiful appearance, I would say all year, really. The leaves are interesting, and they look like many, many leaves on the plant are actually one leaf that is bipinnate or tripinnate, which meaning kind of that and leaves are then called leaflets. Plants bloom in spring, and then over time the berries, we can call them berries, I think, mature and turn red. And then they are seasonal, that they look very nice and bright and fresh at this time of year. The berries will hang on, though, for a long time and eventually turn brown. Not ugly, but not attractive particularly. And one of the issues of this plant is that in areas that have summer rains, it can become a weed. It has become a weed in the eastern United States. I think that the good, responsible management of heavenly bamboo is, as soon as the berries start to lose their luster, prune them off. The clusters are easily removed, and then dispose of them. So you can have these beautiful plants without so much danger of them becoming weedy.
You mentioned that it's a good plant for the front door, and one of the reasons for that is it can grow in either sun or shade.
It can grow in either sun or shade. And my parents had a place in Palm Springs, which is undeniably desert. And Nandina did perfectly well there as long as it grew out of direct sun, perfectly well. So it is a pretty adaptable plant. And it grows some areas that receive a lot of cold. It says with sun protection in up to zone 3. My goodness. So that gets pretty cold. In really cold climates, the leaves will often drop off. And in many areas, they stay green all year. Or some varieties, the leaflets will turn red, even a bright red, during the cool weather, and then turn green again when the weather warms up.
How is that possible?
I don't know.
Me neither.
I don't know, but it seems to me the case. And if the time to choose your Nandinas would be this time of year, because the leaf color shows up. And if you want the red leaves, which is very nice, they would show up in the nurseries as well. There are different color berry forms. There's one that has ivory-colored berries, which is a nice contrast. I think it's one of the toughest landscape shrubs. And in fact, it's so easy to grow and so beautiful. It's used a lot. And don't we all know people that don't like something simply because it's common? It doesn't make much sense, but there we are. There are Nandinas that will grow, spread underground, kind of like a bamboo, really. And then there are some which produce very few flowers or fruit, but they're still pretty. In Japan, there are varieties that have been selected that only get about 4 inches tall, and the leaves are like little threads. And these are for, of course, specialty collectors. But within the genus, you have selected forms from all the way from, say, 3 inches up to 12 feet. The common form will can get fairly tall. And the best way to prune an Nandina is, if it starts getting out of hand, is prune off the whole stem all the way down to ground level. There's almost nothing sadder than Nandinas that are pruned to be upside down pear-shaped. It looks, since the plant is so graceful, to reduce it to this kind of stiffness seems criminal, but thank goodness there's a group of people up in the Seattle area called Plant Amnesty. It helps people think otherwise in regard to some really bad pruning practices.
Yes, I've discovered that with Nandina, it doesn't spread, but it will grow. I have cut several back down to the ground level and covered it with mulch, and they pop up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're irrepressible, aren't they?
Yes, irrepressible. That's a good term for it. They're trying to make friends with my blueberries.
Oh, well, they like similar habitat in California. Anyway.
Yeah. That color change of the foliage I always find amazing, because in the fall, especially with a little bit of frost, there are varieties of the heavenly bamboo. Those leaves turn to red, and then they revert back to green in a few months.
Yes, and another group of plants that does that is the Asian species of box, where when the weather gets cold, the leaves turn kind of golden colored. And then when the weather warms back up, those same leaves will turn green again. Where those chloroplasts go to hide, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it is a heavenly plant. It's the heavenly bamboo, Nandina domestica, probably putting on a show near you. Check it out. Warren Roberts is the Superintendent Emeritus of the University of California, Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. You ought to pay that place a visit. It's free, too. Their website, arboretum.ucdavis.edu. Check it out and then make a trip there. Warren, thanks again for the plant of the week, the heavenly bamboo.
You're welcome.
Don't forget, if you want to learn more about the topics covered on today's episode of Garden Basics with Farmer Fred, please subscribe to the free Garden Basics newsletter. It's on Substack. Details are in today's show notes. The Garden Basics podcast will be on its winter schedule from November through January, which means there will only be one episode per week during this 3-month period, and it'll come out on Fridays. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, and we thank them for their support. Garden Basics, it's available for free wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.